Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this conceptual conversation about Chapter 124, the Program Standards for Public Pre-K in Maine. I'm Leanne Larson, and I'm the Early Learning Team Coordinator in the Department of Education. That is the team where public pre-K is based. This afternoon, I am joined by some other colleagues from the Department of Education's Early Learning Team. And I'm going to just take a minute to point out who I think is on the call. And if I overlook someone, please feel free to jump in, folks, because with the number of folks who are on this session, it's a little bit tricky sometimes to see everyone who's participating. But I believe that Nicole Medore, who's our early childhood specialist, is participating. Marcy Whitcomb, who's our early childhood monitor. Karen Bergeron, who is the preschool expansion grant coordinator. Nina Cunningham, who's the Head Start collaboration director. I'm not sure if JC Holmes has joined us yet, but she should be at some point. And JC is the federal liaison for our department with USDOE. And Jeanette Kirk, who is the Chief of Learning Systems. And last and not least, I know Roy Fowler, who's the Director of Child Development Services, is also with us. If any of my other DOE colleagues, if I have overlooked you, please feel free to jump in and introduce yourself. I do want to share this afternoon that we are recording this conversation. That is both to help us be able to make sure that we collect all of the feedback that is shared with us today. It's also because there are some folks who were unable to participate this afternoon who'd like to be able to listen to the conversation after the fact. I also mention that because you should have come into the weight room with your audio muted. We would appreciate it if you could keep your audio muted unless you are speaking on this afternoon's call. That will help to keep background noise at a minimum and will improve the overall recording. So with all of that said, I want to set a little bit of context around the purpose of the conversation this afternoon, and then share some norms that we would like folks to adhere to just to make this go a little bit more smoothly. It's always a little bit challenging to run something like this in a Zoom context. We certainly wish that we could all be in person where it's easier to see one another. It's certainly easier when you're having a conversation to be able to read body language and to be able to tell who wants to jump in on what point. So we're going to have to just put some structures in place to help with that today. So in terms of the purpose, the Chapter 124 has been in place since July 1st of 2017. So it's been in effect for several school years now. And within the department, we felt like this is a good opportunity for us to take a look at what's in Chapter 124, make sure that we're paying attention to what is working well, where there might be suggestions for improvements that we could make to the rule. We're also trying to be very thoughtful as we work towards expansion of public pre-K programming in our state, to ensure that the program standards that are in place are going to be supportive of that work moving forward. So we thought before we delve too deeply into any revisions to Chapter 124, that it would be great if we could host a conversation to gather some feedback from stakeholders who have knowledge, expertise, interest in these program standards. To help shape our conversation this afternoon, we provided 3 prompts in the notification of this opportunity, and we're going to use those to help organize the conversation. So basically, we're going to run 3 rounds. In each round, we'll present the prompt and we'll offer opportunity for people to comment about Chapter 124 through the lens of that particular prompt. To make that work a little bit more smoothly in this environment, we're going to ask, as I said before, to remain muted until you're called upon. So it will be important for you to raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to speak. Nicole and Marcy are going to be scanning the boxes of participants, looking for people who have their hands raised, and will help to indicate when it's your turn to speak. We're also going to strongly encourage that if you have some feedback to share that would be very easily shared within the chat box feature, that is also a very appropriate way for you to enter the conversation. So if you have a few thoughts, you're more comfortable simply typing them in the chat box, or that's just an easier strategy for you to use, please go right ahead and use that feature. We will make sure that we copy the chat box at the end of the conversation so that we have all of the feedback collected that way as well. If it's easier for you to voice your feedback, then again, raise your hand and either Nicole or Marcy will call on you, and that will help to keep the conversation flowing. When we reach the end of the third prompt, we hope to save a few minutes of time for any additional feedback that maybe you would like to offer, but the prompts didn't lend themselves, particularly well to offering that feedback. We'll try to save a few minutes for that at the end. And certainly that's a spot that you could always offer those comments in the chat box as well. And then we'll outline a little bit about what our next steps will be. And that should fill up our 2 hours together pretty quickly, I would imagine. So with that said, let's dive in. The first conversation prompt is, what aspects of Chapter 124, and of course I can't quite see that on my screen, oh, excuse me, promote high quality public preschool. What aspects of Chapter 124 promote high quality public preschool? I'm seeing quite a few folks using the chat box, which is great. Nicole and Marcy, I'm not seeing any hands currently.
And I'm also looking on the participant list for raised hands. So if you open your participant list, down on the bottom, you should see an option to raise your hand, just as an added feature.
Heather, go right ahead. Heather Manchester.
I figure I'll just break the ice since nobody's
Thanks,
talking.
Heather.
Right? You
And you know,
invested so many
Heather,
millions
that
of dollars
reminds me, sorry, it reminds me that one of the things I should have said right off the bat is that in this conversation, the department staff isn't going to really comment one way or another on the feedback. So it's a little funny for us to be in that position where we're sort of waiting for people to talk and share. So thank you for breaking the ice.
No problem. So I guess what I would have to say, I wrote in the chat box. I think there's a whole host of things that make that support a high quality program. I think the staffing ratios of small class sizes with the teacher twos in the classroom, the evidence-based curriculum piece, the assessment, the fact that there are screenings and then ongoing assessment throughout the year. And I think things are very well spelled out for districts to implement a high quality program. If you use that as your list, it is your list of rules, but if you use that and follow it, it's actually quite helpful. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Heather. Erica Neal.
Thanks. I would agree with what Heather said, and I was also thinking about how it's spelled out clearly to connect both the curriculum and assessment to the MELDs. So I think whenever there's a set of standards that is common across sites, that leads to an opportunity for both dialogue as well as just having that common set of standards for children to be working towards.
Great, thank you, Erica. Noticing still quite a few comments in the chat box, which is great. I don't know if there's anyone who entered a comment who would like to elaborate at all, but we certainly want to provide opportunity for that. Sue, go right ahead.
Hi, Sue Chevalier from Portland. I'll just say that I think it's very helpful to have it stated really clearly that under curriculum and comprehensive assessment, that teachers are organizing space and selecting materials in all content areas, all content and developmental areas to stimulate exploration, experimentation, discovery, and conceptual learning.
Great. Thanks, Sue.
Welcome.
Okay, it looks like the comments in the chat box have slowed down a bit. And I don't see anyone else who is waiting to voice a comment. So we'll move along to the second prompt. So for this prompt, we're asking what aspects of Chapter 124 present challenges for implementing and or providing high quality public preschool programming.
Hi, this is Roy. A couple things. I think that the times and like the required times and days, etc. I think there's a lot of inconsistency across the state, and inequity, really, where some districts might have a full day program, some might run 5 days a week, some might run 2 mornings a week. And I think, again, as I said, that really can contribute to some inequity. That it seems to be the better resourced districts seem to have the highest frequency intensity of preschool. And so I think it just perpetuates the inequities we see across the state. I'm also, and unless I've missed something in Chapter 124, I don't necessarily see, I see coordination and collaboration with CDS, but what I don't see is a commitment to accommodating children with IEPs. Head Start has to have X percentage of slots that are filled with young children with disabilities. And knowing the struggles that Child Development Services has finding placements for these kids, especially inclusive placements, it'd be great to be more explicit about the inclusion of children with IEPs and possibly a requirement to set aside some slots for them.
Great, thank you, Roy. I think I saw another hand. Nicole or Marcy, was it Katie Rice? Is that,
Yes.
did I get it right? Okay.
Hi. I just kind of backpacking on what Roy said. I find CDS, although the staffers are wonderful to work with, I find them, it's not very consistent a lot of the times when children are receiving services. So that is a big challenge that I've come across.
I see others are putting comments in the chat box. That's very helpful. Would anyone else like to either elaborate on something that they've incorporated in the chat box or offer an additional comment?
I'd like to speak up and say something.
Sure.
Okay, I'm looking at the comments and going on what Kate Rice had said also. The biggest challenge, I'm a public pre-K teacher, is again, the CDS workers are wonderful, but they are just so overly busy. And where I work in a public school, it's just painstaking as a teacher to sit by and not see services being met. And I just wish that the public schools could pick up the kids, because and I know this is like a big issue and it's just not that easy, but you know, when they feed them and they bus them and they pay for a teacher and they get all the specials, and it just would be really great to see them reserve like OT, PT, or speech within the school, like they get all the other things in the school.
Can I take 90 seconds, Leanne? This is Roy. So I was just marking down Kate's name, and there was a couple other people in the chat. I would encourage the inconsistency piece about CDS or any concerns you have about services in those preschool settings. Please email me at roy.fowler@maine.gov. My name is right there on the screen, FOWLER, about any inconsistencies you see or challenges. Moving preschool special ed services to the public schools is a hot button issue. Admittedly, I can't do anything about that, but I would love to know about inconsistencies, and for those of you in districts, for you to know that districts always can contract with CDS to provide provide services to the identified children enrolled in the public pre-K. Thank you, Leanne. That's all I'll say.
Thanks, Roy. And Nicole, kindly put your email address in the chat box.
Oh, thank you.
To make it easier to access. Again, folks, I'm seeing lots of helpful comments in the chat box. Is there anyone who would like to either comment or elaborate on a comment in the chat box or offer something else via the audio?
This is Roy again, and I just wanted to follow up on one of Rita Furlow's comments, and that was the standardized screening tools. I think developmental screenings for kids in preschool, but also that moving into kindergarten, having lack of a consistent tool really inhibits our ability to analyze data the way it needs to be analyzed. So.
This is a very good exercise in wait time. Sue Chevalier, I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit. I noticed your comment about difficulty navigating the childcare licensing with 124. Would you be able to offer some examples?
Sure. So we dabbled very briefly this winter in the idea of trying to pilot a before and after school opportunity for our students enrolled in public pre-K programming because our local recreation department does not offer services for pre-K students. So we had families who had older siblings able to engage in rec, but pre-K students who had no option. And we quickly learned that although our pre-K programs were following Chapter 124 in our elementary school buildings, that we'd have to go through a parallel process of childcare licensing in order to become before or after school sites. So to me, it feels like a duplication in some ways of effort, and just wondering if there's a way, and I know the department, you know, we engaged with the department and everyone was very helpful in trying to help problem solve, but it honestly just was an insurmountable task in short time to try and get that figured out. And so I think our thinking was, you know, we're approved to have pre-K programming in the same physical space. So does it really require us to go through the licensing process to offer before or after school programming in the same space? If that clarifies.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised for this particular prompt. So I'm going to move us along to the third prompt. So in this prompt, the Maine Department of Ed is wondering, as we continue to support the expansion of public preschool opportunities to reach universal capacity, including partnerships with Head Start and private childcare preschool programs. Problem I always have is that my chat box covers up my screen and I can't read the prompt. Does Chapter 124 adequately support achievement of this goal? And if not, what would you suggest we might need to consider?
Did you say we could raise our hand?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Tara, was that you?
That's Tara Williams. I'd like
Yeah.
to raise my hand, and for some reason I'm having trouble.
That's okay. I don't think anybody else has their hand raised right now, so if you would like to speak, it would be just fine.
I was going to type this in, but it was going to become a little long, so I thought I would just say it. I think that Chapter 124 has made a great attempt at supporting coordination, particularly in Section 12A, where it's telling the school administrative unit to demonstrate coordination with other early childhood programs in the community. I posted about this earlier in the chat, but I think some more detailed language would be really helpful, because I think what we've seen come out in practice over the last several years is that this can be interpreted in many different ways. And sometimes in practice, it has involved stakeholder meetings and coordinated development, and other times it's involved more letters sent to licensed programs, but not necessarily further coordination beyond that. So I'd recommend that the department look at some either some more detailed language, and then maybe following up with giving folks examples outside of these rules about what other districts have done. Just some way to really dig into this section a little bit more. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Leanne, I'm not sure how to raise my hand either.
That's okay. Just
I
introduce yourself and go ahead. I just can't see who's speaking yet.
Oh, it's
Sorry.
Nicole Kaplan from KVCAP, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Go ahead, Nicole.
I wonder a little bit about some more information about public schools partnering with private childcare providers and how to make that work. Especially as we transition this fall into school related to some barriers around COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And how that might need to happen, and how has it happened with other communities. I know other people, please jump in, but that is an area I think we could do some more work around.
So I'm thinking, Nicole, that there's probably a couple of pieces there. One that might be more in the immediate, just how do we really support better ongoing conversations between school systems and private childcare as we begin to work towards implementing, well, potentially hybrid approaches where kids may not be in school 5 days a week and families are trying to figure out childcare and right, all of that. That's probably the here and now. How do we work collaboratively to do that better? But if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, thinking about how that might get addressed in 124 would be another piece just for the longer term, that better coordination, collaboration.
I mean, I think of it things like, and I'm sure it's been done, but how do private childcare programs afford to hire qualified staff that are required through DOE? And I'm not saying that that should go away, but how has that worked in other communities?
Okay. Thanks, Nicole. Sue, did I see your hand up?
You did. It's kind of the same topic around what Nicole just was mentioning. So I'm sure folks know that Portland Public Schools School Board made a determination last year that in order to be a pre-K partnership site in a community-based program, that teacher and ed tech would need to come on the Portland Public Schools contract. And so this is the kind of conundrum that's not necessarily a Chapter 124 fix, but I think in whatever way we can incorporate something to get at it around wanting high quality endorsed teachers, but also wanting to continue to support mixed delivery systems and not put community partnership programs into a position where one teacher in ed tech in the building is being compensated at a differential level than the others in the building. You know, we've had good fortune in that some of our community partners in Portland are looking at it with the perspective of pay parity and wanting their teachers to get the best possible salaries that they can, so that they have been willing to partner with us under those conditions. But I think it's a huge issue moving forward for viable partnerships, both with Head Start and community partner sites. Just in general, the reality that endorsed teachers that work in public school buildings are typically compensated so differently than those in community-based programs. So is there any way to put some language in Chapter 124 around suggestion for X, Y, or Z. I don't think we can mandate anything, but I think we certainly can suggest what will make it viable for the field and not have public schools taking from community partner sites all of the 4-year-olds.
Richard, you have your hand up? Richard Farnsworth? Do you want to unmute and go ahead?
There. I'm very interested in taking a look at much more collaboration with DHHS, especially around accessing Medicaid or main care for a variety of support services, and making it so that the schools feel comfortable about billing. And I know that we put through some legislation recently to try and encourage that, but I just think it is one more way to access resources so that we can provide the quality of service for these young kids that they need and deserve.
Great, thanks, Dick. Did I see Kate Rice, that you had your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with what Sue said at the end. I know in our community, we have our public pre-K in the school, and then a few private preschool programs. And it almost seems like we're in competition with each other, or we are. And we are expanding from a half-day morning and afternoon program into a full-day program this year at the school. And it is taking a lot of kids from those private programs, which is great for us, but at the same time, it's breaking down these community private programs that have been in place forever and that are a livelihood for people in our community. So I wish there was a better way to kind of like cohesively work together.
Great, thanks, Katie. One piece that I will just mention as folks are still thinking, whoops, I don't know how we ended up back on the wrong prompt, but apologies. Within our early learning team over the course of the summer, we have been developing a guidebook for public pre-K that is designed to help address a number of the pieces with richer examples and suggestions about strategies that can be taken. Sometimes what can actually go into a rule is a little more limited than what we can build out in additional guidance. So many of your comments are very helpful to us, both in informing what can be done in Chapter 124, but perhaps what we could also think about making sure to focus on in that preschool guidebook. And our hope is to have that out to the field by the beginning of the school year, if possible, so that it can be used, especially as expansions or new additions of programming are coming forward. Nicole or Marcy, did I miss any hands that were up?
I haven't seen any others.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, we'd encourage you to reflect back on any of the earlier prompts if something else has come to mind that you'd like to share, or any other additional feedback about Chapter 124 that hasn't been mentioned yet that you'd like the department to consider.
Heather Manchester?
Just one thought. I don't know that it necessarily relates specifically to chapter 124. It's sort of tangential. But one of the things that's always really interesting in our district is that we've got these rules with wonderful, regulations for class sizes and staffing ratios and evidence-based curriculum. And then kids go to kindergarten. And I know we're doing lots of work with our B3 to try to ease that transition. But the kids are not that much older. And sometimes it's like herding cats for kindergarten teachers, particularly with the social emotional needs and things like that. So I don't know where there's a place to address that within chapter 24, but I thought it was worthy of mentioning. And I know we get pushback, particularly on our work with kindergarten teachers when we're trying to put in some of these assessments that we're using with pre-K, like teaching strategies and gold and stuff. Teaching strategies gold, when the kindergarten teachers say, well, they have another person in the classroom. And so it's a lot to manage for our kindergarten teachers. So I guess I'd just like to put in a plug for that somehow with the department, because I think there's some really good pieces in that chapter 124, and I'd love to see that some of those pieces enter the K-12 realm as well.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Okay. I'm noticing a lot of comments in the chat box related to evidence-based curriculum. And I'm wondering if anyone who has commented would like to elaborate a little bit on your thinking.
Sure, this is Tara. I was hesitant to unmute because the storm is really loud at my house right now.
It's starting here too, Tara, so I'm
Yeah.
hoping that the power doesn't go out.
Yeah, I just clarified in the chat box, not recommending removal of language, just looking at expansion of it. For example, it could be related to the quality rating system in Maine and looking at partnering with level or step, depending on if that gets revised or updated as well, of level 3 and 4, something like that, so that there's multiple ways to look at the quality of the program and the quality of the curriculum.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Thanks.
Okay, while folks are still thinking, I'll just mention a little bit about the process that will unfold for us in the department moving forward. So we will collect all of the feedback, both that which was offered auditorily in today's conversation, as well as all of the comments from the chat box. And that will help us to inform some proposed revisions to Chapter 124. We'll be working collaboratively with our commissioner's office to determine what those revisions will look like. And then when we're ready, we'll file those proposed changes. At that point, a public hearing will be scheduled and a comment period. So there'll be more opportunity at that stage to offer feedback on what's proposed. And we'll review all of those comments as well and that response before finally settling on those rules and filing them to put them into action. Generally, there's a period of time before new rules would go into effect, so it won't happen immediately. There's always at least a year, usually to 2-year period for rule adoption so that shifts, if necessary, can be made. Chapter 124 is a routine technical rule, so it's one that we can make adjustments to within the department and follow this part of the process for updating rules, but it doesn't have to go back for a hearing through the education committee the way some of our rules do if they're major substantial rules. So conversations like this are very helpful to informing our work because it gives us a chance to hear from stakeholders about what's the most critical aspects of rules that we're working on, what's working well with them, where are some of the challenges that we can help to address and make them more effective for our young learners and for the educators in our state who are working hard on their behalf.
Dick Farnsworth, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. Just curious, was that originally instituted as a routine technical rule? It would seem to me it's a major piece of program administrative issues that need to be looked at from a much more serious perspective, but that's just my take on it.
Yeah, it is routine technical, Dick. I don't believe JC's on right now. She may have more history about that than I do.
I thought that might bring her out of the woodwork, but
I'd be happy to follow up on that though.
I can do that. I can email JC and get some of the background on that. But it just seems to me as though this is an important enough piece of legislation or rulemaking that really it does need to have at least an initial oversight by the committee, and then maybe in the future routine technical. But I'm sure a lot of that has gotten through in the past.
Nicole Chaplin.
I have one more question. Has there been any discussion around supports or requirements for schools specifically as they think about or begin to open preschool programs? So any TA support, any required training for administrators? Has there been any discussion about that kind of?
Yep. And there's probably a couple of us who could talk a little bit about that, Nicole. So yes, we have had quite a few discussions actually about some of the pieces of support, technical assistance that we could do a better job of putting in place. Certainly, you know, the process as it currently stands is designed so that school systems by the end of October need to indicate if they're planning to start or expand a public preschool program. They'll file their application later in the year, the formal application, and our desire is that during that time leading up to it, they're working at developing those programs. They're doing the outreach to the partners. We're providing technical assistance as asked. Nicole, Mador, and now Marcy coming on and as the early childhood monitor, she will as well be doing a lot of that technical assistance support to school systems. That already happens quite a bit, but we're certainly thinking about other steps that we could be taking to help encourage more of that, as well as just hosting opportunities to do a better job of educating both the schools and various partners about what is possible, what strategies you might put in place to build those partnerships, those collaborations. We're interestingly also working on the development of some a training series for administrators to cover probably a little bit larger than just the public pre-K, but pre-K to 3 span within our schools. So that's underway, and our hope is to have that to offer probably summer of next year. We felt like it was a little bit too much of a lift this year for administrators to try to take that on. So we thought it would be good for us to be more thoughtful in the development and then begin to offer it next year. So yes, there's a lot of that, those conversations underway.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think another piece that I'll just mention, I know there's a few folks on in the conversation this afternoon who've been involved with this work, but the first 10, or sometimes referred to as birth to third, plans that some of our preschool expansion grant sites have developed has been another avenue that we've been pursuing and trying to think about how to expand that work more broadly, because that really looks at how you do build those partnerships thoughtfully from birth through the elementary years to support children and families, so that there's a lot more collaboration across partnerships, and also attention to learning progressions, transitions for students and children. So that's another area that we're trying to do some more work in and figure out how to help communities expand those kinds of models. Okay. Want to just make sure that there's no one else who has any final thoughts, comments, suggestions, either for the chat box or through the audio. Nicole and Marcy, you're not seeing any hands raised. Okay, great. I want to thank everyone for all of the very thoughtful comments that you have offered, both through the audio and in the chat box. Lots of questions and ideas that will be very helpful for us as we are both working on updates to Chapter 124, but also thinking about how we support early childhood education in our state. I appreciate many of the comments that were broader than just public pre-K. It's nice to know that we're thinking about that early childhood span being broader than just public pre-K. All right, So I don't want to hold anyone up. I know we had budgeted a couple of hours for this conversation, but if we don't need it, we certainly don't need to use it. And certainly, if you think of anything else after today that you'd like us to know, you can send it to myself, Nicole Medor, Marcy Whitcomb. Thanks, Nicole. Right on those email addresses. Yes, Sally, that's very true. Often as we're thinking about something down the line, a good idea comes to us. So please feel free to email any one of us. All right. Well, once again, thank you so much for your time, your ideas, your thoughts. And we'll look forward to incorporating those as we move forward.